Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Ektron Developer Office Hours. I'm James Stout, Ektron's Developer Evangelist, and today we're going to be talking about smart forms, which I think is a topic near and dear to every Ektron client's heart and every Ektron partner's heart, because it's our answer to structured content and has been for a long time. So with me to talk about that, I've got the usual crew, the usual suspects, Ektron veterans all. And Brad, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Hi, I'm Brad Steele, Development Manager with Experience, and this week I fight for the users.
You stole my line.
So for those who don't know, we spend a half hour before this making fun of each other. And that's where that came from, so a little bit of an inside joke. And Joe.
All right, I'm Joe Mayberry, a web developer with WSOL, an elite Ektron partner. And I'll go with I fight for the users as well, so let's keep that going.
All right, fair enough. And Ken?
I'm Ken McAnder. I'm a senior technology consultant with Celerity, and I'll be answering questions using the Magic Synergy 8-ball. Because you stole my line, Brad.
So I'm just going to say that anytime my name comes up on that 8-ball is not officially sanctioned. I make no commitments based on that. And since we're here to talk about smart forms, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I fight for the authors this week.
There you go.
All right. So we are going to be talking about smart forms. If anybody has any questions or has any tips or tricks you'd like to share, feel free to jump onto Twitter and post something with the EktronOH hashtag. So we will be watching that and responding as we always do. So Joe, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to pick on you a little bit because I know that smart forms were something you were introduced to a little bit later than I think some of the rest of us when you were working for county government. So would you care to talk about kind of the transition from no smart forms to really buying into smart forms?
You're absolutely right. I started with Ektron. That was way back in version 7.5, 7.6, and I came from the old school web development platform where you wrote static HTML pages and then put those out on the server. So that was the mindset that I had, and I saw the value of having a CMS to manage that, but I stuck with free-form HTML content. What that really did was when I started including other authors, things kind of went badly. It was all fine and good when I was the one managing it, when I was the one putting the stuff out there. Once I started releasing control, things got really interesting. And you got people that are putting images up instead of actual content because they could put, change their colors, and they could put nice little arrows pointing to different pieces on the text that were in rainbow colors. It was quite exciting. So I remember watching a video from Bill Cava, and he was introducing smart forms and how you could use them for different things, and it's kind of like a light bulb moment. I realized how powerful structured content could be, and how that could help me direct people to get what they needed without putting out in all the other stuff that they didn't need.
Yeah, so it's really, it promotes consistency, I think, is the first advantage that you get to a smart form. That there's only one way to enter the content. You're not going to screw it up and put say the media contacts at the top instead of the bottom, or forget to put in something as an H1 or something along those lines, because you're forcing a certain structure, a certain paradigm to that particular type of content. So Brad, what would you say is maybe another advantage to using smart forms?
Well, besides consistency, just it makes it easier for the author, right? Especially if you put in fields that they can pick. So pick a date, pick from a drop-down. It gives the author the ability to just simply point and click, essentially, to get the content in that they want, and then type. so they can focus on that content versus formatting the content. Sometimes that's a frustration for authors. Sometimes they want to be able to format it and they get all mad because they can't. But it forces that brand consistency and just makes it easier for the author so they can focus on what's important, the content itself.
Yeah, I like that very much. And to share a little bit of a horror story, I actually had somebody who wanted to put a cloud background behind their text, just on their page, just clouds behind their text. No, we're not going to allow that. So I think another major advantage, and I'll ask for anybody to jump in and give an example, is being able to repurpose content. So you get it put in a structured way, and then you can pick and choose what values of that entire structure you want to pull into, say, another type of display, or use it in a different way, whether it's feeding to an app or something else. So what do you guys see in that line of things?
Well, I mean, there you've got your summary detail. You can just start with that. I mean, like, say you've got a folder full of smart forms, and it's like a news article, for example. On a summary page, you may just have the title and the date, and then the detail page, you're going to have all the fill-in stuff. But like, you could have an image with it, and maybe you shrink the image up to appear in a smaller format on the summary page, or any combination like that.
Yep. Joe or Brad?
Yeah, we had something very similar where we had one piece of content that was being used as dedicated content on a page, content in search results, and also related content. And we displayed the same information 3 different ways because it came out of a smart form. So we were able to do that. Again, no formatting made it much easier to display the way we wanted to.
Yeah, and Joe, if you had any situations where you had to repurpose some kind of structured content?
Oh, absolutely. And that was really when another really great time when I figured out how important structured content was when I figured out how to actually manipulate that to be able to display it in different contexts and different formats. Using XSLTs or XPath and the code behind to actually pull out items out of the smart form to have something happen. That was a revelation because it gave me so much more potential and possibilities with content.
Yeah, so are any of you taking smart form fields and indexing specific fields and then surfacing the fields out of the index of, say, a search page or something like that, rather than going back to the database to pull that data?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, using the search API, yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of prevents some duplicate calls because you can index the smart form fields and pull those just straight out of the search API, so you're not doing a search and then an API call.
Yeah, I mean, with MS Search Server prior to 9.0, it was a little bit more complicated because that was for. I always remember seeing them. It was something where we were doing adding an external structure, but you go in to your metadata list, for example, in there, and you would see all the smart form fields that you indexed, and kind of the pattern and everything. But I was thinking you had to add them manually, but you don't. That was something else. I have that. My brain jumps sometimes. Too much time spent on search lately.
Yeah, I hear you. So we do have a question on Twitter from Catherine. Would I use a smart form to restrict the user from resizing images? So any takers on that?
Restrict the user.
I would actually say no, you can't, because when they're uploading an image, they can put whatever image they want in there. You can definitely use a smart form to guide the users to say, here's the recommended dimensions to use. With the new adaptive images in the later versions, that's pretty nice. Just started playing with that, where you can upload one version, and when that actually gets uploaded, different sizes will be created based on your breakpoints. So, that's definitely some big benefits with having images in smart forms as well.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing with smart form designing that people have to remember is it's not just restricted to what fields do you want to put on there. You can put all sorts of explanatory text around what you've got and, take advantage of group boxing and whatever. You can group it out a little bit. Now, when it comes to developing against a smart form, if you use a ton of group boxes, you're going to start getting layer-ins to multi-level in your smart form, whether you do it with XSLT or with content types. You're going to have to dig down some levels to do that. So you want to be able to find your balance on that kind of.
Yeah, generally during a project, the actual time spent designing the layout of the smart form is often left off of the project plan. Uh, it can be, it's one of those things where, developer, just go get that smart form in. But you really want to pay just as much care and attention to that smart form as you would any one of your output pages, because your authors are going to be in there. And so consistency, instructions, ease of use. You really want to make sure that you're putting that kind of effort and time into the smart form design as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because your authors are just as much stakeholders in the site and in the content. I mean, they own the content ultimately, and if they're not going to have a good experience in entering that content, then the project itself is doomed to fail. And putting that time into creating a good user experience around the smart forms is absolutely critical. So I'm glad you brought that up. And Joe, you mentioned the adaptive images. I think that is probably part of that solution for Catherine, is to be able to use adaptive images you can actually append type ID equals to the end of a DMS or library image URL and have Ektron resize or force a size onto the image. So that could be part of the solution, but I definitely think the other part of the solution is to put the instructional text inside the smart form, which is part of the design of the smart form. That this is an image that's going on the home page. It should be 200 by 200 or something along those lines.
Yeah, and one of the things, going to Brad's point about designing your smart form, is the big thing to remember is once you design it and it's in there and you start using it, if you make a change to your smart form, it's not going to automatically reflect in your content until you actually check it out and check it back in. And as always, deleting fields becomes a more dangerous prospect than adding fields, simply because it can change your structure and you may have data just disappear that you were using beforehand. So proper design of your smart forms becomes very, very key early on.
Right. So we have a question from Jay, which is always going to be a good question. So has anyone done any XML to JSON conversion for web service to client script implementations?
I have not.
Nope.
But it sounds cool.
Yeah, you should get on
that.
that.
It does sound cool. Yeah, do that, Jay. Let us know when you're done.
We actually did a little bit of that, and just recently, we were talking about something that begins with a B. I guess I probably shouldn't say anything about that yet. But we had developed a web service so that our clients could consume content from the system, and we actually did something very similar to that.
Yeah, so what I normally do is I just take my view model and serialize that out to JSON. So I leave all of my logic for building a view model out intact, and I either have the view model that's used for the rest of the site, or I'll create one that's specific to the service that I need to render, and serialize the view model into JSON and not try to do a direct conversion from, say, the full blob of SmartForm XML into JSON.
Yeah, it looks like Dustin and Jay have got a side conversation going on. It's not on the OH hashtag, but it's if you look up at Jay Burling, you can find some of the conversation about JSON.NET and bypassing content types, and he links a Stack Overflow, so you might check that out. It's not on, like I said, it's not on the Ektron OH hashtag, but Jay and Dustin are both two guys you should follow if you're Ektron Twitter people.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So Oren did chime in and say we have found putting on-screen instructions for our smart forms are very, in all caps, useful for the user, and I would absolutely agree with that. You want to remove the number of decisions that are required for your authors. You want to remove as much of that having to think about things. in order to get them done. It's going to make them more productive. It's going to make your site more consistent. Everything's going to work out better if you can provide those instructions. Inside the smart form, you can put your form into a table if that makes sense. You can structure it into group boxes if that makes sense, and you even have a couple of things that I can show just because I set it up in the few minutes before we got started to make that a little bit easier as well. Jay comments, I like to reuse others' code, in quotes. We know what you mean by that, Jay. You're not fooling anybody, buddy.
Hey, I reuse code of Joe's every time I make a widget.
Well, yeah, you should. If you're making a widget, use Joe's code. Would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, really nowadays with smart forms, there are so many things you can do to make them more usable for the authors. And you can do really, really complex things in the smart form. Like I said, I like to have mine very well laid out using a table, with text on one side, fields on the other side, and very nicely laid out. But then you go in there and you start putting in group boxes to group, groups of fields that you need. You can have those be repeatable, so you can have multiple groups of the same type of content or fields for different things. Putting relevancy on the group boxes, so you can hide them if a particular option isn't selected. So then you've got more functionality that can be revealed when it's needed, or just not in the author's way when it's not.
Yeah, so I actually have something I can share with that. So let me start sharing my screen. Let me make this maybe a little wider. So I'm just doing an office hour sandbox smart form where I've added a couple of fields in. So I'm going to show two things inside this. It's just something I threw onto this local sandbox site, so it's not anything special. And I hope I've not been kicked out in the last few minutes. If I have, I'll just log back in. But there we go. All right. So the two things that I want to show are, is Joe, you were saying the group box you can actually, which is, I still call it a field set, which is the HTML tag, but it's call it a group box inside the smart form. You can show or hide this group box based on another field, and the way you do that is called relevance. So if I go and look at the field properties for my group box, okay.
Then you have to log in.
Then you have to log in. I did get kicked out. All right, let's try this again. I'm just going to back out and come back in. All right. So if I go look at the field properties for the group box, there's a tab at the top of this modal for relevance. And what you can do is you can say if a field has a certain value. So I'm going to plug in, I'm going to click on the X here, and I'm going to say if my show fields tag has a value of true, show fields field. And that's just the drop box that you see right here. And it's just got two options. It's got a do not show, which is set to have a value of false, and a show, which is set to have a value of true, which makes that very simple to set up. Click OK. So now if I preview my smart form, and this may be something that other people are not familiar with, one of the buttons at the bottom will let you actually test the smart form before you update it. So you can view data entry here. So do not show, show. So you can definitely make a set of optional fields and allow that to be a decision made by the author to say, I do need these fields, I need to add media contact information to my press release, or I don't. But if they don't, then you're not cluttering up their UI with these additional fields that they think they are going to need to fill out. If they see the fields, they think they need to fill them out. And so that's a way to hide fields that are not necessary, that are optional, especially if you've got a group of fields that could go into a group box. I've even used that to do different versions of input. So for example, a video smart form. If the video is coming from YouTube, I might have one set of fields. If it's coming from Brightcove, I might have a different set of fields. So you can actually swap group boxes. You can show one and hide three others, and have completely swap user interfaces depending on what's necessary.
Well, for smart forms where you're accepting address input, like for contact information or office locations, that's huge because based on the country you select, you may not need a state selector, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second one I want to show, and I think this is just a convenience thing. It's not necessarily a value, at least in the way that I have it configured, that you're going to use for output. But I've got this text area here, and we can imagine that this is going to be a place where I type in a text-only call to action type blurb or something like that. What I've got below it is a computed field, which is the one that most people confuse for a calendar. So there's the calculated field. There's the calendar. This one looks like a calendar, but it's supposed to be a calculator. So if I look at the properties for my calculated field, what I've done here as a convenience to my author is I've set it up with a formula of just getting the string length for that multi-line text field. And that's it. That's all I've got it set up to do. So it's going to display however many characters are in that field. So if I have a field that I say, yeah, I want to tell the author that the field has to be less than 50 characters, right? So I can do a 50 char max here. And if I preview that, I say I need to keep this short, and when I click away, it's going to give me the character length as a little bit of feedback for your author so that they can kind of keep themselves in check with that 50 character maximum.
Yeah, I think you can mess with the validation rules to enforce that as well if you wanted, but the instruction and the count always helps people keep track of where they're at.
Right. Yeah, it would let them know how far over they are if they're over. Am I just 3 characters over? Am I 20 over? How much do I need to revise this? But yeah, you definitely can adjust the validation as well. So those were the two kind of more advanced options that are really convenient for your authors that I wanted to show.
Yeah, we got a little catch up on Twitter to do.
Wow, you want to read some off, Ken?
Is there a way to restrict the size, height, width of images associated in smartphone content when viewed within the work area? Couldn't you, I mean, there's always that style sheet that's associated with a folder that I tend to ignore, but you could maybe do something with that, like the style sheet that the work area uses, just to restrict the size of an image so it doesn't, like, if you have like a 2,000 pixel wide image, it doesn't overwhelm your work area. I think that's what they're asking for.
Yeah, that would be a great place to start. I've never actually tried that, but I could definitely see that as being a possibility. I would assume that it would still apply the CSS styles to what's going into the XML, but I don't know for certain. I also wonder if you could manually modify the smart form markup itself to add, say, a style equals attribute to the image field that gets generated, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, if it's just for the work area display restriction, I don't know that you want to do that, but because that could affect your main line.
Well, and I was going to say, you almost don't want to restrict it in the work area because you want the author to see that they just put in a 10 meg image.
That's another good point. Or if it really is valid for them to put in a 2,000 pixel wide image for, say, a full-scale background or something like that, then it may be confusing to show it at 500 pixels wide. They might be concerned that it's not what they thought they uploaded.
Yeah, maybe there's a way to hack in some jQuery or something to get the real size or something just for display purposes.
Right.
It's possible. There's ways to do it.
Yeah, so Catherine asked, what is the image resizing API? Is it part of the framework API? No, if you're on 8.7 and prior, and this is all in documentation, but if you're on 8.7 or before, I think it started with 8.5, there's an adaptive images setting inside the web.config. If you're in version 9.0 plus, then you want to look at the breakpoint configuration inside the work area where all of that gets set up. So we moved that configuration into the work area. But that is in the documentation. We can definitely send out a link to that for you, Catherine. If you let me know what version you're on, I'll send out the link to the right version.
Yeah. Got another one. I'm new to smart forms. I set it up in work area fine, but lost on how to retrieve data and code behind to display. Any examples? There's a ton. I mean, there's everything from you can actually pull it out as an XML document if you just get it from Content Manager to using the content types, which I can find my old content types blog and put a link to it later.
Yeah, that's what I send to everybody is the link to your blog, Ken. So don't ever delete that blog because I'll be lost in what's people.
Eventually I'll finish my work on the next generation of that, but I haven't had a chance to yet.
So you do have multiple options. You can do XSLT to just basically transform the XML into HTML, which Joe loves, and the rest of us hate. You can do the content types. The third option that I've seen and tried is to do link to XML, which is for me it's a little bit different. It's something I'm still trying to get used to, but it does work pretty well.
Yeah, there was also some talk about doing taking it out and using JSON to parse it as well.
You can parse the XML using XPath and the XPath Navigator. So
right.
Yeah. And the code behind.
Well, yeah, but you definitely want to do an XPath document and an XPath Navigator and not an XML document because an XML document is a full read-write, uses a lot more memory. An XPath document is a read-only, really quick grab information out of the document.
And the nice thing about a lot of those programmatic methods is you can cache that information once you've got it out, and then reuse it without having to go back and pull it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So on retrieving data and code behind, I would definitely go to Ektron.com, go to the webinars page. At the bottom of that page is a link to the full archive of webinars. Just do an in-page search for content types and check out that webinar by Bill Cava. It's several versions old, but the information's still valid. And then, Ken, if you can find your blog and tweet out the link, you want to watch that webinar to get the concept and then use Ken's code to actually implement.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, just another plug for that webinar. That was one of the key things that got me to understand how powerful smart forms were and how important they were.
Yeah, that was kind of the smart forms have been around, but that was kind of the godfather post to, you mean I don't have to use XML document to look at this thing? Thank you.
Yeah, it was definitely a moment of realization. Going from XSLT, which is challenging to write and understand. Once you're used to it, you can crank out XSLT pretty easily. But if you need to do something very more advanced, then you're trying to mix some .NET with XSLT, and it gets pretty hairy pretty quickly, and it's a lot harder to debug your XSLT. So if you use content types, you're going to get strongly typed data back. You're going to get the full advantage of your IntelliSense, and you're going to have a lot easier time debugging.
Yeah, I just posted that link, by the way, which also has a link to Bill's original webinar. So
great. So we do have some more comments. Haben Jacob, I hope you pronounced your first name right, but I'm not sure. Another scenario SmartForm helped him was when he had to send content for translation, and that makes a lot of sense. The external writer just had to edit the content over XLIF, and our application was able to automatically import the content. Yeah, and they were sure not to lose the structure when the content came back in, which is that's a great story as well.
Now, one thing I would like to point out, once you get your smart forms and you got them set up, one thing that tends to happen is you learn more, and you might want to do something different next time. It can get really tricky, though, if you're trying to do a content migration from SmartForm data that goes from one design and structure of a SmartForm to another. So just be aware of that.
I disagree. I think that's a great way to do data migration, to go from one structure to another. The terrible time is when you have unstructured data. and trying to go to structured data. If you're going from one structure to another, that's infinitely preferable.
Yes, it is. I just worked on one migration not too long ago. We were going from about 10 or so different smart forms down to one, and that got really, really interesting really quickly.
So you were trying to do one smart form to rule them all?
Yeah. They had, well, in this particular instance, the client had a lot of different versions of the same type of content, smart form content, that we consolidated that all down into one and simplified it. But we had to take all their legacy content and move it into the new one.
Right. So Catherine, it looks like Joe sent out a link to the documentation. Let us know if that doesn't help. And Jay also tweeted out the link to Bill Cava's webinar, which is awesome. I've retweeted both of those. Oren posted an excellent example of a smart form with instructions. I'm sure your users are really enjoying that. Just say no to XML and XSLT. I like that.
We'll let Jay and Joe have that war offline.
Oh, it's much more fun when we all get together as a group and fight. So yeah, I think that's just about it. That was kind of an action-packed episode. I think
we could do about 5 more of these on smart forms. You know that.
Yeah, we could probably sit and talk for hours just on smart forms. The one thing that we didn't cover in depth is using smart forms for configuration and localization of non-content text areas. So which would be something like the placeholder text in your search box would be non-content text. But you can use smart forms to manage that text and even translate it. So I think we've talked about that before. It's probably worth doing a follow-up. Brad, I know that's near and dear to your heart, so I'll make sure you're on that conversation.
Definitely.
But yeah, those are just
configuration.
For what?
Somebody, huh? I mean, smart forms for configuration. If only somebody written a blog. Oh wait, somebody just tweeted that link.
I'll look for it.
Y'all welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a blog post that's on Developer, isn't it? Developer.ektron.com.
I think it's there too. Yeah, I posted the link to one of my Tumblr.
Oh no! You need to post the official link.
Oh Lord, I have too many places.
All right, so definitely you can use smart forms for things that are not just visitor consumed content like articles and image sliders and things like that. But you can use it to do configuration for your site. This is the menu ID we want to use. This is the logo we want to use, and in the header and things like that. Put all of that into a configuration smart form, and then you can translate that config smart form. And one of the things I think is really cool about that is if you do want to, say, use a different menu, next week or something like that, you can schedule that smart form to use a different menu ID. So you can actually schedule, some structural changes for your site that way.
Yeah.
One thing you want to watch out for is your key names. You want to make sure they're obscure enough or written in a way that the translators are going to translate your keys for you. We've had that happen.
Yeah, well, you do yours as key value, which makes it more extensible in the long run. But if you wanted to do static fields, you can go that route as well.
Yeah, and we've done some structured ones too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to jet, guys. I got a conference call.
All right, thanks everybody. I appreciate your time, and we'll catch up again sometime soon, I'm sure.
All right.
Right.
Thanks a lot.